Britain's Chancellor George Osborne is announcing billions more in government spending cuts. Austerity measures are already biting for many across the UK, and as RT's Sarah Firth reports, the effect could be devastating for some of the most vulnerable.
Once a place of sanctuary, now a potent symbol of austerity Britain. Her small garden was where Stephanie Bottrell often sought refuge from her financial woes. It was here she'd raised a family. But when her son moved out, she was caught by the new government scheme. Dubbed the bedroom tax, those in social housing with spare rooms must face a cut to their housing benefits or move to somewhere smaller. Less than a month ago, and the 53-year-old grandmother of one killed herself by stepping in front of a moving lorry. She left this suicide note behind for her devastated family.
A back garden was her world. She loved a back garden, going out there. This was her home, and the thought of moving away and leaving all that she'd known for 18 years was quite a big impact.
Small, tight-knit communities like this one that Stephanie Bottrell lived in might be a long way from Westminster, but it's many of the people who live here and in communities like this that have been among some of the hardest hit by the government's austerity measures.
There's many people are facing the same problems. They're having to pay considerably more from a budget, a household budget, which already is just stressed beyond belief. To have cut back on austerity, fine. But this problem was caused by the banks. This problem was caused by not proper regulation of the financial services. It wasn't caused by poor people.
The government insists that the cuts are necessary and that the current changes to the benefit system will eventually improve the lives of some of the poorest families. But as part of the welfare overhaul taking place right now, Angela Murray had essential social care slashed from 20 hours a day to just 3. Earlier this week, she delivered a petition signed by 45,000 people calling on the Chancellor to invest in social care.
If you think to yourself, you know, you haven't committed any crime, you are in a situation that's not your own doing, and you've suddenly been restricted to something that's like a prison sentence, how would you carry on living? Could you face another 50 years of that kind of life? I know I can't.
I'm sure they've all got big houses, they're all well provided for, you know. Some of us are not gifted with money. Some of us just lead ordinary everyday lives. And unfortunately, you know, that's the way of the world. But I'd rather be that than one of them.
Experts have said that situations like Stephanie's are avoidable and point to Iceland as an example. The country saw a collapse of its banking system a few years back, but protected social spending. Choosing stimulus over austerity during their banking crisis saw Iceland enjoy 3% growth in 2012 compared to just 0.2% in the UK. But with the government seemingly committed to their austerity drive, the worry is that these cuts will, for many more people across the UK, like Stephanie Bottrell's friends and family, have effects that are irreversible. Sarah Firth, RT, Birmingham.
For more on the UK cuts, I'm joined live from Edinburgh by writer John White. So Osborne claimed that the British economy is, quote, out of intensive care. Do you think that's the case?
Well, only in the rarefied world of the Tory party would that be the case. The country has seen 1.1% growth in the last 3 years. That's the worst level of growth in this country's economy over the last 100 years. That can by no means be considered a success.
Who do you think is going to be most affected by these cuts?
Well, clearly, as your package just explained, the poor are going to be hit harder. What we are seeing is a continuation of the mass experiment in human despair, which this coalition government has achieved to describe as an economic policy. It is ideologically driven, it's the economics of the madhouse, and it is done with the objective of effecting the transference of wealth from the poor to the rich, under the pretext of an economic crisis. Not reason, it's a pretext. This was the economic crisis which hit this country in 2007 was their economic 9/11.
Now, official figures show the deficit has been growing last year despite the previous cuts. So then what's the point if it doesn't seem to be doing much good?
Well, as I just said, this is ideologically driven. If you're considering these policies on the basis of economics, then clearly it is completely irrational. The US economist Paul Krugman rightly described it as a medieval doctor draining a patient of blood, and when that doesn't work, draining more blood from the patient. This is entirely appropriate to describe this economic policy, this austerity. Austerity historically has been discredited. It doesn't work in times of recession. At times of recession, the government needs to spend more to reintroduce demand, which is contracted as profits tumble. And you must place this alongside the fact that the Office for National Statistics, the government's own body set up to monitor these things, came out with figures in April which stated that in the final quarter of last year, UK businesses, excluding banks, were sitting on £318 billion of surplus. And that money is money we need in the economy. They're not investing, despite all the inducements from the government by way of tax subsidies, tax cuts for the rich, and all the various other emoluments that the government has given to the rich over the last 3 years.
So what do you think is the best way that the government can battle the deficit?
Well, it has to start investing in the real economy. It has to start directing banks to lend rather than pleading with banks, especially banks in which we own a majority share, such as RBS. The government should take over RBS, its operations, and start lending, not in the interests of the free market nostrums, but in the interest of the real economy, where the economy needs it. We have a housing crisis in this country. It's the worst in the Western world. It's a scandal. And we need to start investing in building affordable homes. Rather than punishing the poor for being poor, they should start actually divesting money from the rich to the poor, as befitting a civilized society.
Osborne announced cuts to the police budget also. Do you think that would have an effect on the crime rate?
Well, not really, because based on what we know now, a lot of the criminals are actually in the police. They're also sitting in the boardrooms and in the House of Lords. It may have an effect, but I think they've consolidated the police and taken away regional power from the police. So I think it's yet to be seen. But as I say, the cuts in the police budgets are minimal compared to the cuts that's going on for the poor in terms of benefit caps and so forth.
All right, John White, thanks very much for your insight.